Hello, my name is David Roach, and if we haven't met before, I'm the Awana missionary in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I put together this conversation for our April Zoom Hangout that we do with ministry leaders across this area of Central North Carolina. And so our topic for this one is building a spine and heart into today's young people. So it looks at this book, Resilience. So some of you may be familiar with that one. So that's where we kind of get this spine and heart idea. And we're looking at what that looks like and how we can practically apply that and build up some spine and heart into our young people. So first of all, just kind of have a definition of what we're talking about here when we're talking about spine and heart. We're looking at young people today and how they're going to engage the culture in 2050 and beyond. We can see what culture looks like now and what it's looked like in the past, and just this gap that's forming between the church and secular culture. And so it stands to reason that this gap is not going to get any smaller in the time period for these kids and teenagers that we are having in our ministries. And so we want them to have this spine that stands up for their Christian faith. Even in this secular culture, that they can stand strong for their faith, not hide away from it, but stand up for their faith. And then we also want them to have a heart where they embrace this culture. Now, not necessarily embrace all that the culture is saying and doing, but be able to engage it and not just shy away, but actively have those conversations, listen well, have love and compassion for this culture that they are a part of. Okay, so when we're talking spine and heart, those are the things that we're talking about. Spine is what points to the truth. And I love this imagery here of heart building the bridge that wins that truth favor. Okay, and we've all probably experienced people that have all spine and no heart, stand up firm for what they believe and maybe don't have the compassion part of it. And then you can have all heart, but you don't really stand up either. So you can have one or the other. And so my goal as a dad, as a ministry leader, is I want my kids to have both a spine that stand up for the truth, for the gospel, for God's word, and also a heart that engages the culture and the world around them. In the book, Valerie points out the story of Hayden Philpott, who's pictured here. Hayden is a middle schooler, and this is a popular day called See You at the Pole. Of course, in this picture, we can see that Hayden is standing alone. This fear that middle schoolers have of standing out and being the only one there, well, that is a reality here for Hayden. And so there was a blog post about this. You can look more about it, but it was just a really powerful image, a powerful a message that just hearing what was going through Hayden's mind. At first, he just thought his friends were late. At first, he was just waiting for them to show up. And so his prayer was in one direction. And then as time goes on, he realizes no one else is coming. And so then the prayer becomes something completely different, that he just accepts that he is standing there alone. And his prayer becomes, God, I pray that even by me standing here alone, that could prick the heart of somebody who's watching. And then little did he know that there was going to be, it was going to go viral. It was going to be all over Facebook and this blog post about it. So that wasn't his thought going into it. He was just praying for his school and his country at the See You at the Pole Day. But I would say that Hayden is definitely a model of this resiliency, having this spine and heart that we're talking about here. So as we talk about spine, we'll talk about spine and then how to ways to build up spine in our young people. And then we'll do the same with heart and just take a few minutes to do that. So we probably can see this, right? The kids are going to need a spine. They're going to need to have an ability to stand up for their faith. This world is becoming increasingly not only ignorant of the Bible, but actively speaking against it, even hostile towards the things of faith. And so we're seeing the Christian voice being silenced in a lot of areas. And so young people will need to be resilient, like ants. Is that right? Ants? Yes, ants. Maybe a lot of you know this already, but ants just are extraordinarily resilient. They, here in this image, they are floating on top of the water. They have created a raft by forming their legs together, making this tight water barrier that they can float for weeks if they need to find dry land, and they rotate positions, and they just work so well together. And I think that's a great imagery of how we want our kids to be able to adapt to different situations and to be really resilient. So ironically, in the spine segment, we're talking about this invertebrate ants, but there's definitely a lot that we can learn from these little creatures and just how they band together and problem solve. So how do we build up a spine? How do we build up a spine in young people? I think it starts with prayer. We love those prayers of the kids, right? We want to develop some powerful prayer warriors. First Chronicles 12. You're in First Chronicles, I'm sure, for your morning devotions. We're all always there. But this is the part where David is rallying together his mighty men. Saul's coming after him, and so it's breaking down each tribe and who's listed there. And then one tribe is especially mentioned, is the tribe of Issachar. And it said, of Issachar, men who had understanding of the times to know what Israel ought to do. There were 200 chiefs and all the kinsmen under their command. What a great compliment that they were men who understood the times and knew what Israel ought to do. I think as we develop prayer warriors, these kids, we want them to understand the times that they're living in, understand their role in it, their role as believers. So I know that's a prayer that I have as a dad, that my kids would be these prayer warriors, that they would be men and women of like these men of Issachar who know what to do. I think right after COVID, right, we're interested in getting this power of church attendance. I know even for adults, we have been feeling disconnected in the past year. And so that's true for our kids too. We want these kids to understand that they belong to a church. And when they're at church, that's going to, build up their faith, build up their knowledge and love for God and his word. So that's definitely an important part of building up a spine. We want them to have opportunities to lead. And sometimes it's not always going to go great, not going to go well necessarily the first time. But as they lead, as they learn, as they become more battle tested, as a sports fan, I think of those teams that have the loss in their season that rallies them together. There's some things that that grow us by our defeats, and what we can learn from that builds us up even stronger. So are we giving young people the opportunity to lead and take that hands off a little bit, let them fall down a little bit and be there and encourage them and help them get back up again? A lot of this happens in tough conversations. As far as building up a spine, we want to help these kids to have a worldview, and that happens every day, helping these kids to have a biblical worldview. So I know I want my kids talking to me before they're talking to their friends at school or the kid down the street. We as parents, as ministry leaders, we want to be involved in these tough conversations. Don't shy away from them. So some of this is kind of on us. And that's why I have this last point here, which kind of stands out a little bit amongst the group here. But what we do with kids is important. If you're a parent, if you're a ministry leader, if you consider yourself just a leader who works in a specific age group, what you do matters. So this forming of this biblical worldview, this building up of a spine, this happens in the day-to-day conversations, the day-to-day ministry that we have. So I don't like to think of people as volunteers. Yes, that may be the letter of what we're looking for when we're looking for people to serve with our children and youth. But I love the word leaders. We're looking for leaders to step in. We're looking for disciple makers. So those are some words that I like to use just to instill the value, the importance, the need that we have for people to serve alongside us and helping grow up these children and youth into resilient followers of Jesus. I'm going to leave this slide up here for just a minute. You can pause the video here if you wanted to. Just pray, think about, what is God teaching me about this? How can I be helping to build up a spine in the children and youth that I'm serving? The next one we're going to talk about is heart. So we've talked about spine, how to stand up for our faith, stand up for what we believe. And then I want to talk about this heart piece, and then that imagery of the bridge, right? We talked about that a few minutes ago. I love that. Just it goes from knowledge, and then the love that we share about it builds the bridge over into the heart of the other person that we're talking with. It wins the favor of that person. It doesn't say that everything that our culture says is right. There's biblical truth, but we want to also just be able to validate that perspective and meet these people where they're at when it comes to sharing the gospel. Tertullian had this image of the church being so eye-catching in that the church loved each other. They loved others, and that we would have this somehow morally superior lifestyle that attracted the pagan culture to us. And so I know I don't always feel that way in the church. I don't feel like that way as a Christian, that my love necessarily stands out, but that's a great imagery. And I think that that's really true. I mean, if we can find a way to love the culture that we're in, despite disagreeing with it, man, that just doesn't seem like it jives well with today's culture, right? I mean, all of our discussions, it feels like, now we know this isn't how it's supposed to be, but it just feels like whoever can say it the loudest or gets the last word, they win. And you sort of, it's more of an argument than it is a discussion. So what would it look like for me? What would it look like for you if our conversations, instead of trying to win the argument, was more about loving truth? What would it be if the love of God came rushing forth out of the words that we say? And could our response, could that be what wins over the culture around us as we have this heart? Not only a spine to stand up for what we believe, but a heart that loves this culture that we're involved in, loves this person that we're having this discussion with, even if we're not seeing eye to eye. So how can we build a heart in our young people? I love serving in the home, outside the home, in the church, outside the church. I know as a kid, my parents were always the first ones in the church and the last ones to leave. So I had lots of practice setting up and taking stuff down. Those are ways that we can be serving together. Maybe it's some other things around the community, around the city, neighborhood where you live, homeless care bags. There's lots of different ways that we can be serving together. And so carving out some time to do that as a family, as a church, as a children's ministry or youth ministry, having times to serve together is a great way that we can build a heart together. Practice empathy, understanding more. There's more to the world, there's more to life than what our kids have experienced. I mean, we have to show them a wider array of what life's like in other countries. I mean, even sharing the challenges that other families in the church could be facing. But when we get to experience life in other people's shoes, it gives us more of an understanding that what's easy for me may not be easy for other people. And some people may be really better at some stuff than we are in our family. So practice that empathy. As parents, as ministry leaders, asking some questions that maybe are a little bit more challenging, and then helping them to find answers to them. So maybe we can ask questions about school or about current events, even at an age-appropriate level. Maybe there's some ways that we can channel that into some good biblical discussion, and being willing to learn ourselves. I know we shy away from this because we don't have all the answers, but that's okay. The kids don't necessarily want us to have all the answers. They want us to engage the questions that they have with them. So engage those questions, and then think about how we can be praying in regards to those conversations, praying for the kids, the youth, the friends, other people that other people at school. But living this faith with the children and youth that we have in our families and our ministries. We want to build up that heart that they have. So just like we did with spine, I have some questions here. So I encourage you to read over these, think through them, pray through them, and we'll continue our discussion here in just a minute. So there's a lot to this spine and heart conversation, and we've just sort of dipped a toe in it. So what's the big idea? My big idea, I mean, as a takeaway, is that our discipleship with these kids and these youth matters. Everything that we're doing with them today, tomorrow, into the future, it's going to matter. And building up a spine and heart into our young people, it's not going to happen at the flip of a switch, the snap of a finger. It's going to take some time. But it's so worth it. We want to build up resilient disciples of Jesus. And I have 2 Timothy 2:2 here, and this is a verse that I memorized in high school, and so I memorized it in the King James, so I put it there in the version that I memorized it in. And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. Going back to that conversation about not calling them volunteers, but calling them leaders and disciple makers, I love this verse because it reminds me that I'm not just someone who's ministering to my children. I'm a disciple maker who's making disciple makers. And so I love that idea of passing down this faith. These things that we're building into our kids, it's going to continue on. It's not something that's going to stop right here with the child that we're talking to or the young person that we're talking to. As we pray with them, as we pray for them, our prayer is that these kids are going to pass along these things that we're teaching them to their children and to the kids that they're serving in ministry, maybe at one point down the line, and it's going to continue on. So thank you for your involvement in children and youth ministry, this future focused ministry that we have. And I hope this is encouraging to you as we build up young people with a spine to stand up for their faith and a heart to engage the culture that they're in. Thanks for participating in this with me.